You're listening to ayahuascapodcast.com.
For me, the archetypal and the shamanic are what they call visions and what we call archetypes, where they call entities and we call archetypes, are basically the same. They're just different words to describe it. Most people have a very intellectual relationship with the idea of archetypes. It's like a symbol that just lives there, as opposed to what Jung actually meant is that archetypes are living entities. They're living energies that impact us, that can possess us, that can teach us. For me, the idea is when we have experiences, and I think ayahuasca is one of the most powerful openers to the archetypal. First, just to note what happened to me when I was having the experience. Did I contract? Did I expand? Did I feel fear? And so really, I want just people to tell me what was their experience and not to jump to meaning making. I don't know if people have that in your retreats, but people they love it when they have visions of jaguars and owls and, all kinds of familiar mythological images. It's less fun when the visions or the archetypes are more dark or more challenging, or you see the wickedness of your mother or the harshness of your father or stuff like that. So the idea for me is, how do I stay in the experience without moving too fast to interpreting it and intellectualizing it?
Hi guys, and welcome to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, with you the host, Sam Believ. Today I'm having a conversation with Ido Cohen. Dr. Ido Cohen is a clinical psychologist specializing in Jungian and relational depth psychology with the focus on psychedelic integration. He's the founder of the Integration Circle and has worked extensively with ayahuasca, trauma, and shadow work. His research explores how to turn peak experiences into long-lasting transformation. This episode is sponsored by Lawira Ayahuasca Retreat. At Lawira, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. Lawira, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you. Ido, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me.
So I was planning to interview Ido already, and then we were at MAPS, and I met him there. So it's cool to meet you in person. Ido, let's start by maybe you share your story. How did you choose this line of work? How did you end up working with psychedelics?
It's a good question. First, really, I'm glad to be here, and I've listened to your podcast, and I know people you interviewed, so I'm glad to be a guest here. Two answers. One is a long time ago, I was traveling in India and had a bunch of really profound experiences with psychedelics and without. And I traveled with other people. And when I came back, I was really fascinated with seeing how we were readjusting to our old environments and seeing the challenges and difficulties, and seeing people having peak experiences and coming back, and after 3 months it's like nothing happened. And it just really fascinated me. I was like, I couldn't make sense of how can anyone who experienced something so personally profound can forget about it or let it go. So I really wanted to study the idea of change. And fast forward 10 years, I had my first ayahuasca experiences, and it was time for me to choose my research study. And I was like, it was clear to me, and I think in a way the plants helped, that I wanted to study integration. I was like, I want to understand how we take profound psychospiritual experiences and turn them into embodied change that is sustainable and carries over time. And that's when I started doing my research in 2011 until 2017. Was fortunate enough to get a grant and go to Peru and do part of the research there at Niue and interview people and have more of my own experiences. And that was the beginning of everything. That's birthed the Integration Circle, birthed a big part of my psychotherapy practice. So that would be the short answer.
And what did you find in your research What is it? Why is it so hard for people to get their lessons and integrate them? Yeah.
So many layers, right? There's a very cultural layer, which is most of us live in a very secular culture that's devoid of depth and spirituality and soul, and doesn't prioritize taking time to process, analyze, embody, integrate any experience, let alone peak psychedelic experiences, or peak experiences, period. So first of all, we're dealing with a cultural complex, right? When you have these experiences, the first thing is, how do I bring all this newness into a culture that doesn't really support it? Right? We always talk about it in the ayahuasca community, how that's one of the big differences between living in the jungle or living in indigenous tribes where everybody has done it, and it's so weaved into the fabric of the village, versus living in the modern West, where it's slowly getting more and more integrated, but still as a culture, we don't have that relationship with the sacred and the numinous. So that's one. Two, it's, that breeds our personal struggle with capitalism. We want things fast, we want things immediate, and we don't want to, and if possible, is with as little work as possible. And when I interviewed people, all the people that I've interviewed, 92% of them said that when they had their experience and they came back, two things were very clear to them. One is that in order to really stay in relationship with their experience, they have to prioritize it. So they had to start pushing other things away and saying, like, no, this is my priority right now. I'm going to focus on my experience, what happened to me, how the experience is expanding, the feelings, the sensations, the images that came with it, and really build a relationship. And I think that's the key word for me, is relationship. So yeah, prioritizing that, and with the sacrifices that come with it. Family members not taking it well, friends not taking it well, wanting all of a sudden really shifting how you're interacting with people, what your hobbies are, where you want to spend your time, and how you're managing yourself, right? Most of us have all kinds of, let's call them leisure practices. And I think integration sometimes calls for it to change. So no more binging of Netflix. It's actually, I'm going to go into the forest and sit with my experience. Or instead of distracting myself with friends in a bar, I'm going to go and sit and meditate and journal, or whatever it is that I need to do as part of building that relationship. And then there's obviously all the integration practices and how people engage with it, really seeing the necessity of having a psychosymbolic framework to work with these things, and the ability to work with intense emotions. I think those were two very big things. Integration brings a lot of opening, and opening brings by necessity a lot of emotions and a lot of sensations. And it's one thing to be in the 2-week 2 to 4 week sparkle period after experiences where everything is better and lighter and clearer and there's deep insight, versus when the deeper emotions kick in, which is the sadness and the grief and the pain and the memories, or the transcendence and being asked to make big changes in my life, or to start doing things that I've never done before. It all brings all kinds of confrontations with the old version of us. So a lot of it is also a dialogue between who I was before the experience and who I am now. How do you take new information and put it in an old model? So I think that's the main, I call it the initial gates of integration. Like there's the immediate, like the first 3-4 days, and then there is the first 4 weeks. And if you can put really supportive structures, either with support or yourself, through other people, with yourself, then you can really get access to the integration. But most people, I think, kind of the integration falls apart within the 4 weeks. It just becomes another experience.
Yeah, integration is this thing that everyone talks about, and there's so many different ways of explaining it. And but it's just so hard. And I think the problem is that integration is just not sexy. It's not this ayahuasca experience is this wow. It's this, even though it's hard, the people, it's like, it's interesting, it's adventurous, and integration is like, it's like some really bland food that's kind of healthy for you, but nobody wants to eat it. And, but it's like, you need it. And what I find is people who need it the most also are sort of least able to do it. And people who are able to do it kind of don't need it, which kind of makes sense because if you're a meditator, then it's you don't really need that much healing because you're already like healing yourself. So it's what can we do about it? Like somebody comes here.
I think it's interesting what you're saying. I always my analogy is that the difference between the experience and integration is experience is like having a really hot one, a very steamy one-nighter with someone. Integration is like having actual intimate relationship because it takes a lot of work, a lot of investment, a lot of showing up over and over again. But I don't know, I met a lot of meditators that are actually not good integrators. That they meditate out of their integration. And I've seen them come to, my community's ayahuasca circles for years. And they come back with the same issues. And because what they do is they meditate on it. But actually the integration is like, no, get off your pillow and go have uncomfortable conversations. Go try this other new thing. Move your body in a different way. Maybe get out of your mind and come into your, your heart or your body. So I think integration is really taking in a different lifestyle. I'm curious what you think, Sam, but I believe that when you go work with plants, the opening of our personal unconscious, opening to the world of the plants, to the shamanic space, those experiences come with their own requirements. They want things from us afterwards. I've had experiences of seeing what I perceived was the plants telling me, you should really stop eating in that place because the food there is really dirty. And I was like, well, but I really like that place. So we're like from the smallest of things to, oh, wow, who I thought I was is actually based around a trauma story or what my parents told me or what the culture told me. And now I have to start. And this is something we don't talk a lot about. And I'm curious, what do you think? There's a lot of disintegration that happens before integration happens.
So first of all, I have to be honest, I'm bad at integration myself. Like I'm just not good at it. I run this extremely busy ayahuasca retreat, which recently we calculated we have 49 people working for us. And we host 3 retreats every month, and on average 70 to 90 people come. So, and I drink medicine once a month, and it really helps me, and I always learn something new. But integration, I believe, requires time, and I don't have any. So I'm just kind of like, it definitely, ayahuasca still helps me even without integration. I think, so there's like, 50 shades of integration because you cannot have zero integration. Like, to have zero integration, you still have some. So what we're trying to describe is like how to get the optimal integration. But for me, the optimal integration would be, first of all, switching off my phone for a week. But if I do that, my business collapses. So
unless you let someone else take the business for you.
Yes, I'm working on that. I'm actually in the process of hiring a general manager. But so I integrate.
But you see, this is where it gets interesting, right? When integration starts asking. That's what I mean by it has a demand, right? So you can tell me, yeah, I think really the next good step for integration for me is I need a week off. But I can't, right? And then it's like, but ... And I would say like, wait, but what if that's the integration? The integration is to do the hard thing, to open up, to trust someone, to give them responsibility, right? That sometimes integration looks like that. It looks like a business decision. That's why I think it's such a beautiful art and science, the idea of integration.
And it's definitely a guilty thing for me because, you can, if you're watching a video on whatever it is for you, like right side of my face, there's an integration journal that I wrote for people, which we give to people when they come to the retreat. So they journal, but I hardly journal, maybe twice a month, and I'd like to do it more, but it's just not possible. And then I tell them everything, from all the instructions. And I've interviewed 10 people talking about integration, all amazingly. And I know everything there's to know about it. But yeah, the other thing is actually doing it. So let's talk about that. Let's be realistic. Same as me, I'm busy with my business. Other people also, they come back home. They have to go back to their job because unfortunately they can't take a few months off and they have to make money. And then there's like extremely addictive devices that we have to use for work, but then you get dragged into like doom scrolling and stuff like that. Not sponsored, but there's this app, it's called Stop Scroll, that I got like 5 days ago. Amazing. It just doesn't let you see any short format video because I can sort of resist long format content still, have enough like willpower, but the sport format stuff is like it's like cocaine for your dopamine brain. So how do people that they just had powerful ayahuasca experience, transformative, they've learned so much, now they're going back, but they still have to have a job, they still have a family, how can they integrate? You talk about integration requiring time and patience, but they don't have that much time. What can we do? Because I also need to know.
I think I totally agree with you. We can't, I've seen many people blow up their life to integrate experiences, and I don't know if it's rarely necessary. There is real world responsibilities. Like you said, we have jobs, we have partnerships, we have kids, businesses. And those are real. We can't just drop off everything. And within that, I truly believe in that cliche that it's not that you don't have time, it's just you're not prioritizing. And that's where the conflict begins, right? Old versus new. If I go to do an ayahuasca retreat with you, Sam, and I come back and I'm like, I see that I have a phone addiction as a way to regulate my feelings or dopamine seeking, and it would really benefit me if I cut it in half and instead read a book or spend more time with my partner, or that's my integration, that's my responsibility. So the idea is to do what I call the next first step, which is like, okay, that's the goal. The goal is to cut your screen time from 6 hours a day to 3 hours a day. Let's say we're not cutting it all together, because there's usually those goals kind of fail. Like, great, what's the next first step? Do you download an app? There is a thing called Cube that takes all your social media apps and locks them in your phone and will not give you access for more than a prescribed amount of time a day, right? There's all these things that you can do. So it's like, okay, what's the next first step? So lock your apps, right? You download something and you decide, that's it, I'm committing. I'm locking the apps I can only do 2 hours a day. But now that's just the first step. Usually what's hard for people is once you change the habit, all kinds of things happen internally because you open up space. So all of a sudden I'm nervous and I can't distract myself with my phone. Or I have 5 minutes, like I have 10 minutes between clients, and instead of doing my usual phone check, I'm just sitting with myself. That's the more interesting part for me, right? The changing of behavior is one thing, but it's like, what happens when the behavior changed? That's where the transformation is. It's like, oh, wow, now that I have all this time, I'm noticing that I carry a lot of anxiety and a lot of tension in my body, and it's sometimes not easy for me to relax. Or when I don't distract myself, I talk to my partner, all of a sudden I feel more vulnerable, or all kinds of things. I think for me, that's where the work, the closer to the core work happens in integration, that then gives us the behavioral change. Because when I do that, my psyche, my system, and the connection between my psyche and the plants will start giving me the insight as far as what's the behavioral change. Because then I'm like, oh, wow, you know what? I cut 3 hours of screen time, and I see that if I meditate for 20 minutes or go to the gym or take a walk or sit outside and stare at my plants, I feel better. That's the practice. But it only can come through noticing what happens when I change the behavior, when I take away the habit. So I really believe, yes, and within the constrictions and responsibilities of our life, we can all open up. And I've worked with really almost every demographic. I worked with very busy CEOs to people who are, 9-to-5ers, to people who are off the grid. Everybody deals with this issue of prioritization, and everybody finds time. Some more, some less.
No, I agree. You can always make time. That's for sure. If you really prioritize it. But then it's like, of course, if it feels like it's work, and you've already feel like you worked enough and you want to rest, then it's also hard. Why is it so hard for modern humans to?
Well, you said something interesting. If you mind, you said if it feels like work, right? I'm curious, why do you think that people feel that taking care of themselves, loving themselves, investing in their own well-being, which is basically the only thing we actually have, feels like a burden, right? It's work.
Because it's hard.
Yeah, but also going to work every day for 50 years is hard. But what's hard? What's hard about it? Why is that so hard that we're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that?
So for me personally, I'm like a dopamine addict. I get bored, just sitting by myself, like I get bored. Like one of the only ways that I can do it is if I smoke a cigar. And even then, sometimes I get this amazing thoughts and I want to use my phone to save it or do something. And then I get dragged into the
hole.
Yeah.
But what happens when you smoke a cigar? Why that allows you to kind of to relax and slow down?
No, because I guess it's a time where I, specifically kind of like there's this contract that I have with myself that this is my time to rest and relax, and yeah. And if I have a cigar, it's like it's easier. I don't know, maybe something in the tobacco, a plant spirit. There is a ceremony around it.
Absolutely, right? There is a ceremony. You take it, you cut it. I don't know how you do it, right? Where you take it, you cut it, you sit probably in this.
I stand intention, I smell it, I light it.
So I think that's already actually one of the things that helps people with integration that I encourage people to do is get out of automatic and bring intentionality to what you're doing. I always tell people, it doesn't matter what integration practice you do. What matters is how you enter it. Because you can do all the things. You can journal and do the thing, but you're just doing it on automatic. It's not going to give you much. But if I'm doing it with intention of like, I'm going to sit down and connect with the plants, connect with my experience. And from that place, I'm going to smoke that cigar or write or go talk to my friend. It's going to look very different. Right. And there is something about that, that me and my colleague, we tell you, the ceremony continues. The ceremony doesn't end because you are staying connected to wanting to be that level of consciousness and on that level of intentionality. So you asked why I think it's hard for people to do it. I think that these practices really connect us with two things we are very disconnected from, and not by fault, because of how most of us are raised. We're disconnected from our soul and the depth of our psyche, which is our psychological, emotional, somatic self. And we're disconnected from let's call it the archetypal, transpersonal, shamanic worlds. And these plants open us up to reconnect with both of these worlds. And that can be incredibly overwhelming. even if it's blissful, it can be incredibly overwhelming. It can be odd. It can be, like you said, it can be really hard, right? We start remembering things we don't remember. We start understanding things about how ourselves and why our lives look the way they look, and it doesn't feel good. Or we encounter truths about, right, what happens in the world, or collective pain, or grief, or, transcendent states that are just foreign for us. So the first thing is, right, what's hard about it is, how do I stay, and the key word is relationship. How do I build relationship with this thing? How do I stay engaged with it? And when that feels like a foreign experience to me, or a foreign language, the instinct usually for most of us is to do this, is to kind of push away. Or we minimize it. Or my favorite one that I think most of us do is we start bargaining. We start negotiating. Oh, well, it wasn't exactly this, or it wasn't as profound, or I don't really think I met the spirit of the plant or the spirit of the river. Or I don't know if that memory I had about my childhood was exactly right because I was, on psychedelics. We start negotiating. And when you negotiate with something, you water it down. You start creating disbelief. You start creating distrust. And then it's harder to relate to it. It's harder to work with it. It's harder to be with it. Because you're in a conflict. You're creating a conflict. As opposed to what I encourage people is, what if you don't negotiate? We're not saying it's the absolute truth, but we're not doubting it. Your way to figure it out is through engagement, conscious engagement, exploration. Then that will tell you what feels more true, what feels less true, what's more relevant to me, what's less relevant, what I can, like you said, realistically take on, and what I can't. But engagement in relationship is the thing to do.
Cool. Let's talk about one of those things that you just mentioned, archetypal, transpersonal. Tell us more about it. And, what is it? How do you connect with it? And what to do with it if people have those kinds of psychedelic experiences?
Well, for me, a lot of it comes because I'm influenced by Jung's work. I was trained at a Jung Institute, and the idea is that for me, the archetypal and the shamanic are what they call visions and what we call archetypes, where they call entities and we call archetypes, are basically the same. They're just different words to describe it. Most people have a very intellectual relationship with the idea of archetypes. It's like a symbol that just lives there, as opposed to what Jung actually meant is that archetypes are living entities. They're living energies that impact us, that can possess us, that can teach us. So for me, the idea is when we have experiences, and I think ayahuasca is one of the most powerful openers to the archetypal, is first just to note what happened to me when I was having the experience. Did I contract? Did I expand? Did I feel fear? Did I feel some kind of... So really, I want just people to tell me what was their experience. And then, and not to jump to meaning making. I don't know if people have that in your retreats, but people love they love it when they have visions of jaguars and owls and, all kinds of familiar mythological images. It's less fun when the visions or the archetypes are more dark or more challenging, or you see the weakness of your mother or the harshness of your father or stuff like that. So the idea for me is, how do I stay in the experience without moving too fast to interpreting it and intellectualizing it? So I want to stay with the feelings, I want to stay with the sensations, and I want to stay with the interaction. So what happened? Did I hear something? Maybe it wasn't verbal, but I was standing next to this big luminous tree and I felt an incredible sense of peace. I felt a connection to the earth. Okay, that's the information I want to work with. So that would be the first step, is really staying with these things and getting curious. Like, why did I feel relaxed when I was Let me see if I can find something. Yeah, I remember for myself, I had one ayahuasca ceremony where I was sitting, and the person who was leading it had a lot of Buddhist influence. And all of a sudden, I saw this in my field of vision, this great big black Buddha, and with flames all around it. And my response was contraction. I felt fear. And I heard this voice say, "Did you notice what had just happened to you? Like, why are you afraid?" And it opened this whole process for me around really staying with that question in the moment, being like, wait, why am I afraid? And ended up being this profound lesson for me about my own relationship with the feminine. Because the image, then the vision was like, I am a feminine Buddha. Like, why are you so scared? This is just my look. This is not my essence. And I had to go into this very deep inquiry of like, oh, why did I respond that way? Why did I contract? What is it about this fierce version of a feminine that made me feel fear? And I worked with it for a long, long time afterwards, and in a way still working with it. So for me, really, the idea is how do you get very curious, stay very present with the feelings and the sensations and how they unfold when you explore them. And eventually some insight, some lesson that's more tangible will come up. And then there is what I call there is integration, and then there's implementation. Then maybe there is something to implement.
This episode is sponsored by Lawira Ayahuasca Retreat. Most of you know Lawira if you've been listening to this podcast for a while. Some of you might have already been to Lawira before. For those who don't know us yet, we started Lawira with my wife 4 years ago. At Lawira, we combine authenticity, accessibility, and affordability. Lawira is currently highest rated ayahuasca retreat in South America with more than 630 5-star reviews and an average rating of 5 stars. If you come to Lawira, you'll experience powerful, authentic ceremonies led by our indigenous shaman, Fernando, in a very beautiful venue just 1 hour south of Medellin, Colombia. We're surrounded by nature and have comforts like hot water, Wi-Fi. At Lawira, our team has guided more than 2,000 people through this life-changing transformation of ayahuasca experience. At the same time, we keep it very affordable. At the moment, we have retreats starting at as low as $645. So whether you're coming for healing, clarity, or a deeper connection to yourself, Lawira is the best choice. If it is your first time drinking ayahuasca, you will love our 3.5-hour preparation course and integration support. All of that is included in price, as well as pickup from Medellin, accommodation, and ayahuasca. There are no hidden fees. Visit lawira.com to book your retreat or learn more. Lawira, connect, heal, grow. LAWAYRA.com. Thank you for sharing that experience. And so you say archetypes in Jungian philosophy is like same as entities in the more shamanic approach. So what are archetypes? What are the common ones? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, there's a book called Jungian Shamanism by a guy called Michael Smith, who he wrote this a long time ago, and he was one of the first pioneers to bridge those worlds. One of the ways in which Jungian shamanism crossed is that Jung talked about being possessed. He said archetypes will possess you. So when they really descend on us, and if we don't have the awareness, the practices, the consciousness, right, that's when I become a child. I'm not experiencing my child, I'm become a child. Or I become the rageful parent, or I become the, the person who goes to one ayahuasca retreat and thinks they are world-renowned healer, and now they have to go spread the gospel, which we can talk about a possession of the healer of the shaman archetype. So that's I think one way in which they really, those worlds mirror each other. But let me say the question again, Sam?
So what, you say archetypes is the same as entities, so.
Yeah. The common ones are there is like the personal psychological, the inner child, the inner critic, the father, the mother, culture, the lover, the magician, right? There's all these things. The shadow. Let's just start. That's a huge one in the psychedelic world. Everybody talks about shadow work, shadow work. Shadow is an archetype, right? That's one version of an archetype. And then we move to what we can say there is transpersonal archetypes, which is animals, gods, goddesses, deities, God, soul, right? Those, and we kind of move between those worlds. We can experience also their connection, right? I worked with someone who had pretty severe sexual trauma and was raised in a religious background where God was only a punishing God. And then this person went and had a entheogenic experience, and she met the most benevolent, loving God. And she didn't know what to do with that, because her own experience of herself was that she's bad. She's damaged because she had sexual trauma, that God only punishes people like her. And then meeting this benevolent God who continuously for hours just showered her with love and praises and reassurance and very positive reinforcement. And she came out of it. She's like, I don't know what to do with this God. She literally said that. I don't know what to do with this God. It doesn't fit inside this. And our work was to build a relationship with that God. And see, like, because that relationship with the God meant that she had to deal with her own self-hatred, with her own, right? How she was wrapped around shame and really identified with shame, how she treated her body, how her relationship with food, it opened up every dimension of her life. And that's because she had this very, very profound experience with what we would call a transpersonal archetype with God. And I think they are the same, or I would say the same as what I understand shamanic entities to be, because they are an entity, right? The plants have an intelligence. I think that's across ayahuasca traditions. All plants have intelligences. All of a sudden, the animals, when you're in that world, animals talk. They teach you the land. You can hear. I remember being in Peru and hearing the jungle breathe in my first ayahuasca experience, and it was incredibly beautiful and overwhelming. And I was like, oh, wow, I can hear the breath of this thing and how big and profound. And from what I'm curious, the tradition you come from and how you work with this. And from what I understand, they have, at least in the Shipibo lineage, which is what I'm connected to, they relate to those entities the same way. You talk to them, you give them your time, you do ritual, you honor them, and you listen, and you see what you can learn from them. And that's exactly the same thing as working with archetypes, either in dreams or in psychedelic experiences.
Yeah, I think it's the same in all traditions that are connected to nature. They're very, very clearly understand that everything has a spirit. You say, talking of spirit, soul, you say that we need to bring soul back into the world, and that we are affected by invisible, but it's not mainstream. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is from James Hillman, who's the father of archetypal psychology, and he says, our lives are shaped by invisible forces more than we care to admit. And I truly believe that. I think humanity we needed to create this idea that we are in control. Because if not, we had to confront the fact that we're not, and there are other forces that are at play here, and we have to be aware of them and accept that we're not the masters of the universe, and we can't dominate aggressively everything and anything in order to feel that way. Yeah, and that's like one of the big insights to start with is, and I think the soul got relegated to that. I don't know what you think, Sam, and I'm curious, but I believe it's hard to really benefit fully from psychedelics if there is big religious trauma. Because anything that has, right, oftentimes psychedelics and plants can take us into the religious world, which is, again, God, being, Christ consciousness, or whatever religion you're from. And the moment there's a deep religious wound there, we tend to push. There's like, I don't want this because it's activating. And because we live in such a modernized, mechanical, secular culture, which again is not all bad, but we have slowly, surgically removed soul and the idea of soulfulness from our day-to-day life. So we have the combination of, soul belongs to religion. Religion is bad. I don't want to deal with that. And well, we live in a secular culture. We don't talk about soul. We barely, most of us are barely honest when people ask us how we are, let alone new than. So to bring back the idea that, wait, we can create soul, we can create, is threatening. I think to really drop with someone in a way of creating connection that allows for your soul to start kind of being felt is very, very vulnerable. And vulnerability is very scary. And intimacy is very scary. And at the same time, there's such a profound renewal of interest in psychedelics and plants. I mean, psychedelics is mind manifesting. It's already hinting to something deeper. And entheogenic is having God dwell inside of you. But we divorced the plants from their how we categorize them. And I think it really, without recreating an integrative approach to our psychedelic and entheogenic experiences, we're missing out on the domain of soul. So we're stuck in psychological, physiological, emotional. And we're not really giving ourselves the benefit of, no, there is something spiritual here. I will define my spirituality. You don't want to call it soul? Great. Call it whatever you want to call it. Authentic self, higher self, divine self, whatever. But I think you and I'm going to put you in this because we are people who are trying to have a voice and have a voice in this movement. I think we need to normalize that, to really reclaim the fact that, these practices bring you back to soul, and not keep doing what the legalization process is asking us, which is, no, stay scientific. Make sense, stay scientific, stay medical. It's like, no, why would we do that? We already know that that's part of this. I'm curious what you think, though, about this.
Yeah. Well, legalization process, gladly we're not part of it because it's already legal here. and the way it's legal, the way ayahuasca is legal here in Colombia is, as long as you have an indigenous shaman, not necessarily indigenous, but he has to have a permit from indigenous council, and those are not easily received. So there's some kind of control still, but it is legal. So that's not my fight. But yeah, it's just stupid, like saying, let's do it scientifically, and here's your compound, and you sit, and you have two therapists sitting next to you, and you have a blindfold. It's like trying to create a container, which obviously makes no sense and is missing a lot of parts, like the shamanic aspect of it. Instead of just being like, and by the way, this already exists and have existed for thousands of years. Let's just go get ideas from it. It's like, let's say China created a gunpowder, and they're already sending rockets to the moon, and then all of a sudden, in the parallel universe, we rediscovered China only now, and we're like, okay, and let's create our own version of the gunpowder. It's like, if it exists, just go and use it. So regarding religious trauma, I never had religious trauma, really, but I always have had a negative view on religion, and rightfully so. If you really look at religion, it's just wars and pedophilia and all kinds of weirdness. So it's it doesn't really seem to have much connection to spirit or to the soul. At least I've never been exposed to anything religious that was beneficial. I'm not saying some people have. I'm sure there are good players in that field as well, but I personally grew up thinking that I was, not that I was completely irreligious, but I was agnostic. That's how I called it, So I sort of like, yeah, maybe something exists, but I don't know. But whatever is out there, religions, I think it's all garbage. That's what I used to think. Now, going back to the point of like psychedelics and lack of soul, I think it's impossible to work with psychedelics and not become a believer in something. It's just like, it's a question of when, not if. Like if you drink ayahuasca, I give you maximum 20 ceremonies before you're like, oh my God, God exists. And most likely just one will be enough. And then you start to understand, and then you start interacting with religious entities from different religions. And you're like, how is that even possible? Like, if you interact with them, and some of them, like I've interacted with gods I didn't even know exist, and then I Googled them and I was like, wow, this is real. And that's kind of transpersonal stuff where it's like if somebody believed something into reality, now it is there, even when after they died, But basically, you then become spiritual, then you realize like even Christian stuff, like I hung out with an archangel one, I was like, what the hell is that? I'm not even religious. And so then you kind of start realizing that in the core of every religion, there was something really profound. So, but
How do you understand the fact that you encountered all these other religious entities?
how do I understand it?
Like you said, it's something from a different foreign world, right? So why would you connect with them?
It was always in the ceremony, and I see them, I see them and they talk to me, and then I'm like, who are you? And that's how of course you can say you make it up, and it's still possible. I'm not saying that I haven't, but I've had experiences where I saw an entity and they would talk to me about a certain topic, and then I look it up and it says that that's what the entity was used for. Let's say, oh, this is the god they used for protection against such and such, and this is what my experience was. So I was like, okay, well, if it's real, then. But I'm basically very confused. I'll be honest. Like I'm very confused. I had my previous worldview or cosmovision as what's his name? He interviewed you as well. I'm so bad with names. Anyways, one of the podcasters that interviewed no, I can check, but he used that word a lot, cosmovision. So that's where I picked it up. His name is Jason.
Oh, Jason. Yeah.
Jason.
The Universe Within podcast, I think you just rebranded it as something else. Yeah.
I had my old cosmovision or my old worldview that was like, okay, God doesn't exist. You die, you rot, you disappear, whatever. Now it's like, oh, and it seems to be other lives afterwards, and there's a meaning, and a soul chooses life, but it's not complete yet. I have to like create it piece by piece, ceremony by ceremony, podcast by podcast, book by book. And I think that's much cooler than just accepting an existing version and being like, oh, this is real. So I don't know if it answers your question, but I wasn't that.
No, but what you're making me think, it definitely answers my question. And what you're making me think is that, yeah, of course, most of us get the version of religion that's very surface level and has a lot of, like you said, politics and power and abuse attached to it. And we don't get to act. And I think then we go and have these experiences and we get direct access to the esotericism of the religion, which is where the soul of religion lives, right? The esoteric knowledge of it. It's interesting. This is what I wanted to, you made me think about, the famous religious leaders who did DMT or psilocybin study that was just released after a long, long time. It was done years ago and it was just released in a grand. And I thought it was fascinating to read different religious figures like, rabbis and priests say on some level, they felt like it's the first time they experienced religion in their soul. They're like, I just realized that they realized after having a psychedelic experience that their experience of religion was very, very either mental or emotional, but not on that depth. And all of a sudden, they understood the soul of the religion they were practicing. They embodied it on such a deep level. And I find that fascinating.
Yeah, like here at La Guaira, we had everything from Christians, Buddhists, Orthodox Jews, Sikhs, Muslims, and they all seem to be able to connect better to their version of God. So it does not. A lot of people are afraid. A lot of people are afraid I'm going to drink ayahuasca and then I'll become ayahuascarian or whatever. Like it's in a religion. And an analogy I like to use is if God is internet, then ayahuasca is a computer. It's like it's an interface. It's like a way to connect, or even like ayahuasca is. Then in that case, God is a server and ayahuasca is the internet. It's just this way of connecting, and not a religion in itself. Fascinating topic. Honestly, I have no answers. I'm still trying to find them. But let's switch topic and talk about shadow and shadow work, and because I think it's very big in Jungian approach, and that's kind of how you view the lens through which you view this work. So talk to us about it. What a shadow? Is it bad? Is it good?
Both and more. Yeah, shadow work is like this big catchphrase in the psychedelic world. Shadow is a few things. Shadow, as I understand it, it's everything out of the light of your consciousness, right? That's why it's in the shadow. So it's everything, and everything means painful, unbearable, horrible experiences that happen to me, my own traits that I don't like. Maybe I'm selfish, or I'm an asshole, I work with someone who said I'm the devil. Not metaphorically, he said like I'm a horrible person. And he was able to admit it after doing a lot of psychedelics. But before that was his shadow. He just disregarded the fact that he's a serial adulterer and he's hurting his kids and his wife. And so one version of shadow is everything that's too painful to bear, experiences or traits about ourselves or the world. And it can also be things that are really beautifully powerful or authentic about us that are also unconscious, either because of early experiences that we had where we had to repress those parts of us, or aspects of ourselves that we don't even know yet. We're not finished products. There is a shadow inside of us of people that we will become. But if we don't do the work to find it, we won't grow to our fullest capacity. Psychedelics are great, and entheogens are wonderful at opening up our unconscious, and all that material starts flowing out. So it can be, trauma memories that I don't want to deal with, or painful emotions that are hard to deal with, or sensations. It can also be, like I said, personal traits that I keep repressing. And psychedelics can really open us up to, first of all, connecting with those aspects of ourselves and trying to understand them more. So we move, I think ayahuasca, for example, is really good at confronting us with shadow and with less shame. Or it kind of doesn't care about your shame. It's like, here, you have to look at this. If you want to be whole and you want to grow, you need to confront this. So it gives us direct access to those parts of ourselves, which gives us opportunity to, again, bring them into consciousness, bring them into light, and start building a relationship with them. Because as long as we don't have a relationship with our shadow, it runs our lives. You use the analogy of a computer. So it's like a software operating in the background. So you're on your computer, but then the computer gets stuck, or there's a virus, that's that shadow software. So from this perspective, shadow unprocessed or repressed shadow creates symptoms, or it creates repetitive unhealthy patterns, or even destructive patterns. Addiction, for example, or self-sabotage, inner critic. Those are the big ones that people really can connect to when they think about the painful ways in which unprocessed shadow emerges. So for us, it gives us the opportunity to do what I think a lot of the times what happens, 95% of the time, what happens in psychedelics and plants is that we have shadow encounter, which means we see the thing either for the first time or we reconnect with it. But that's not shadow work. Shadow work is a much more nuanced, conscious, engaged process where I get to observe and ask questions and feel deeply and process and do that over and over again. So for me, there's a separation between shadow encounter, which is what happens when we have these revelations in ceremonies, versus sitting with it and actually working, relating to it, molding it, alchemizing it. And that's the same for the other shadow, the golden shadow, right? If I can see, let's say that I re-experience my creativity or my sexuality, or all of a sudden see that I use these examples because they're very easy to connect to, that I am not, I thought I was heterosexual, but actually I'm bisexual. Poof, that opens up in an ayahuasca ceremony. And I never believed I would be that. That golden shadow, which can be my most authentic self, needs the same kind of engagement. I've seen people have the most profound, quote unquote, positive experiences. But just like the other shadow, it asks them to either feel things that are very overwhelming or to change their life. And they're like, wait, I don't know if I want to do that. That's really threatening to my idea of self, my identity that I've built and curated for so long. So shadow is really, it's both of those things. And for me, the most important parts is understanding that, I don't know what you think, Sam, but no, you cannot resolve, rarely people resolve their shadow in a psychedelic experience or in one retreat or something like that. You can have a profound amount of insight. Absolutely. You can come back with a whole wealth of new knowledge that will help you. You can come back with less symptoms. Maybe you were very depressed and you go and do a retreat and the depression is reduced by 50% or disappears. That's wonderful. And that is one version of shadow processing, but then there is the question of like, okay, what creates the depression from the beginning? So the idea is to really take all those revelations of shadow and start working and start relating, again, that word, relating to them. And then the processing comes, right? What do I do now that I understand how my childhood trauma shaped the way I intimately bond or shaped my attachment system? What now? I had the insight with you in ceremony, but now what? What do I do with that information? All right, so that's when the work, quote unquote, the shadow work becomes. And it's important for me to really highlight that, like where we started, yes, it's hard work. It's very demanding, but people need to remember that the whole point of doing shadow work is to actually have a much more full, rich, and alive sense of self and life. It's not to go through, I have a friend who's like, it's not dumpster diving. The idea is not just to keep jumping in the dumpster and find the trash and the garbage and all the rotten things and just like, oh, look, more rotten things I found. No, that's just the first part. First part is how do you take that garbage and you use it as fertilizer, something that will help your personality, your psychological structure, and your soul be more expressed and grow.
Perfect, Ido. Thank you so much for this knowledge. I think it was very interesting and very packed episode. We're running out of time, so
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam.
Yeah, my pleasure. So tell the audience where they can find more about you. Maybe somebody wants to do shadow work with you because or join your.
It's a great timing. So you know Kyle. So actually, Kyle from Psychedelics Today, and us, we're going to collaborate on doing an advanced shadow work course that's going to start in 2 months. So that's one way. The best way to find more about our work is theintegrationcircle.com. Our website, we have all our offerings there, both our referral network and recorded seminars and our live classes. Or in the Integration Circle on Instagram. Those are the best ways to stay connected with us.
Thank you, Ido. Guys, you've been listening to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, we are the host, Sam Believ, and I will see you in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to support us and psychedelic renaissance at large, please follow us and leave us a like wherever it is you're listening. Share this episode with someone who will benefit from this information. Nothing in this podcast is intended as medical advice, and it is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you.